two men named Ronald Joseph Platt. One, a dead man found at the bottom of the sea. The other, a successful businessman with a young wife. Who is the real one? And what is the mysterious connection between them? Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. Who says dead men tell no tales? This is the story of a dead man who wouldn't stop talking, even from his watery grave. Exhibit A, a body found at the bottom of the sea. A fisherman 6 miles off the South Devon coast of England hauls in his net to find a body.
It was really a 1 in a million chance that the body was recovered at all. Our force area has a large coastline, and it's a frequent occurrence that we get bodies floating out at sea. What was unusual about this perhaps was that 6 miles out is quite some distance.
The dead man is fully clothed, even down to his shoes and Rolex watch. But he had no wallet, no ID, no personal effects. Who is he? And how did he get 6 miles out at sea? As with any unexplained death, the body is sent to the morgue to be autopsied. Investigators hope the autopsy will not only tell them the cause of death, but give them clues to the mystery man's identity.
The first thing was that he had an injury to the back of his head. This is not uncommon in bodies fished out from the water. Then he had a second bruise on his hip.
The conclusion from the pathologist was that this was quite consistent with some form of boating accident where perhaps the person had slipped, struck his head, which rendered him unconscious, and fallen into the sea and drowned.
In any case, there was absolutely no identification on him except for the Rolex watch and a tattoo on the back of his hand.
As Torquay, where the body was found, is the birthplace of murder mystery writer Agatha Christie, the media dubs him the Rolex Man and plays up the whodunit aspect of the mysterious corpse. But still, no one identifies him. Then investigators get their first break. One of the mortuary assistants recalls that Rolex keeps detailed and accurate records of watches they've sold or serviced. The Rolex company is able to give investigators 2 big pieces of the puzzle: the time of death and the dead man's name. The dead man's watch shows that it stopped at 11:35 on July 22nd. Rolex tells police that it takes 44 hours for one of their perpetual motion watches, when not moving, to wind down and stop. This means the dead man entered the water on July 20th. Through Rolex, investigators also learned that the watch has been serviced on 3 occasions. Its owner is Ronald Joseph Platt from Harrogate in the north of England. In Harrogate, investigators find an address for Ronald Platt. The landlord tells them that Platt lived alone, but moved out a month ago at the end of June. He left no forwarding address. But on Platt's rental application, under personal references, he had written the name of David Davis, together with Davis's cell number. The police called Davis on his cell phone. Though they don't like to do so over the phone, they inform him of Ronald Platt's death. Davis seems stunned. When police ask if they can come by to find out more about Ronald Platt, Davis suggests it would be just as convenient for him to drop by the police station. When David Davis arrives at the police station, investigators encounter a tall, well-dressed businessman, polite and anxious to help. Though Platt was British, he loved Canada. In the interview with police, Davis explains that the tattoo on Platt's wrist is a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. The country seemed to suit this shy, quiet man. Platt had recently tried to make a go of it in Canada, but had to come back broke when things didn't work out. He had always had difficulty getting jobs. In fact, Davis says that the last time he saw his friend Ron Platt was the month before, at the end of June. Platt was off to France to start a new business. Davis had loaned him some money. Authorities are this close to closing the books on this case, calling it a mysterious boating accident. But to make sure they haven't overlooked something, they go back to square one. They re-interview the fisherman who hauled up Ronald Platt's body. That's when they learn he had been holding back on them. The net had contained something else, a 10-pound sou'wester anchor.
We thought that was suspicious, as well as the gash on the back of his head. This was really the first indication that there was a suspicious factor surrounding the death.
A re-autopsy is now ordered on Platt's body. This time, the pathologist is looking for signs of foul play. He re-examines the 4-inch gash on the back of the victim's head. Could it have been caused by a blow? The pathologist also notices that there is a bruise on the lower thigh, and that the bruise on the corpse's hip has become more pronounced. Could they have been caused by the anchor being inserted into the victim's belt in order to weigh him down? When the anchor is placed against the corpse's body, it neatly fits the 2 bruises. This theory is confirmed when samples taken from the victim's belt show traces of zinc matching the zinc of the anchor.
We'd come up with this anchor and could now prove that the death itself was almost certainly murder.
But who would have murdered this shy, quiet man, and why? The story of Ronald Joseph Platt had started as a dead body out at sea, thought to be the victim of a boating accident. But the discovery that the dead man had been weighed down with an anchor clearly suggested foul play. The police need to ask Ronald Platt's friend, David Davis, a few follow-up questions. When they can't get Davis on his cell phone, an officer drives out to Davis's house. Instead of going to David Davis's house, the officer goes to his next-door neighbor's house by mistake.
He went to the wrong house. The neighbor there pointed out his mistake. The officer said, "Well, I'm looking for Mr. David Davis." He said, "Well, you've got the wrong address because there's no one called David Davis at that address. I've known the family there for about 3 years. The man is called Ronald Platt. He's got a very young wife in her early 20s, and they've got 2 very young children."
The officer is amazed. The man the neighbor identifies as Ronald Platt is the man who told police his name was David Davis.
Who was this man? Why was he using this dead person's name? How had it come about that he was using this name for the past 3 years?
The police learn that Davis is an international financier who owns several investment companies, is a well-respected man in the community, and is a church-going man. The worst anybody can say about him is that he seems very controlling in his relationship with his young wife. But police are keenly interested to learn that Davis owns a sailboat named the Lady Jane. In a boating region like South Devon, trying to locate one particular boat is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Where was this boat that he had moored somewhere in South Devon? And how could we find that boat? Was that boat a crime scene?
While investigators search the many coastal marinas for Davis's sailboat, they get an unexpected break. They find Ronald Platt's former girlfriend, Cynthia Browning. Cynthia is shaken by the news of Ronald Platt's death. When investigators ask her if she knows David Davis, she tells them that she worked for David Davis about 4 years back, depositing large sums of money abroad for him in various foreign banks and photographing art he might want to buy. It seems curious that Davis had offered her the job only after she mentioned that her boyfriend, Ronald Platt, dreamed about permanently moving to Canada. Then about 3 years ago, Davis invited them to his house and surprised them with 2 one-way airline tickets to Calgary, Alberta. Ron was so ecstatic about moving to Canada that Cynthia agreed to go with him. According to Cynthia, Ron had a difficult time earning a living in Canada. And after a year, Cynthia left. A year after that, Ron, defeated, returned to England. By then, David Davis was using the name Ronald Platt, so that meant there were suddenly 2 Ronald Platts on British soil. The police suspect Davis is responsible for Platt's death, but they now need proof. The police finally find Davis's boat and learn that he took it out of the water on July 21st. The date is significant, since according to Platt's Rolex, he was killed on July 20th. Investigators also catch Davis in a crucial lie. He claimed in his first interview with police that the last time he saw his friend Ron Platt was the month before, at the end of June. But checking Davis's cell phone records, investigators now learn that Platt and Davis had adjoining rooms in a hotel near Torquay the first 3 weeks of July, right up until the day Platt was killed.
At the end of the day, I took the decision that we would charge David Wallace Davis with murder.
When the police search David Davis's house, they find gold bars and thousands of pounds in cash. When Davis's young wife is brought in for questioning and asked why she and Davis are masquerading under the name of Platt, she says it is to evade Davis's ex-wife, who is after him for alimony. On the advice of his lawyer, Davis refuses to talk. His lawyer also demands his immediate release.
He was saying, not only have you got no evidence to show that my client was responsible for this murder, but you haven't even got any evidence to show that this person was murdered, and he wanted his client released immediately. We had a gut feeling that if Davis walked out of that police station, that we would never see him again.
When police search Davis's boat, they find an itemized receipt paid for with Davis's credit card for the purchase of a 10-pound sou'wester anchor. They can now prove a connection among Davis, his boat, and the anchor that weighed down Platt. But Davis's lawyer counters that A, the anchor doesn't prove Davis had anything to do with Platt's death, or B, that Platt died out at sea. Platt might have committed suicide on shore, then floated out to where he was found. Police contact Dr. Bob Allen, a forensic expert in tidal currents.
One of the most important things that has to be decided is whether the body floated or whether it sank. And the reason for that is that if the body floats, it's subjected to the wind and the waves on the surface, the body can move considerable distances if it's blown along. If the body sinks to the bottom, be it naturally or by weight, then the body is largely shielded from the wind, and even the tidal currents are reduced.
Dr. Bob Allen did tests in the laboratory to find out whether Ron Platt's body would have floated or whether it would have sunk, even with the 10-pound anchor.
And the conclusion to that is that he was a sinker.
This means that Ronald Platt went into the sea where the fisherman hauled up his body. Now police have to prove Davis's sailboat was at that spot on the day of the murder, and that Davis was on it. Oh, and one more essential piece of the puzzle. Why? Why would Davis need to take Ronald Platt's name? What terrible secret was Davis hiding? A tidal expert had determined that the dead man, Ronald Platt, went into the sea 6 miles out on July 20th, exactly where the fisherman hauled up his body. Now police need to put their prime suspect's sailboat at that spot on that day. The only way to do that is by Lady Jane's GPS, Global Positioning System. This is a system which uses a series of navigational satellites to help vessels determine their latitude and longitude at any given time. It also retains in its memory a boat's last position. But the GPS is missing. Police eventually discover the GPS in Davis's locker. They have hit the jackpot. Accessing the Global Positioning System's memory, experts are able to get a readout that on July 20th, the Lady Jane was at precisely the spot where the fisherman hauled up Ronald Platt's body. Then something happens that investigators would not believe if they read it in an Agatha Christie mystery. David Davis's fingerprints have been sent to Interpol. Interpol sends back a match. The man police have in custody is not David Davis, but Albert Walker, the most wanted man in Canada and one of the 12 most wanted men in the world. And the woman who claims to be his wife is not his wife at all, but his 21-year-old daughter.
We now knew who he was, and we now, importantly, had a motive. Quite clearly, he was wanted for extremely serious offences.
Combining the investigators' finding with the forensic evidence, this is what Detective Sincock believes happened. 6 years ago, Walker, wanted for theft, money laundering, and defrauding investors of millions of dollars, fled Canada with his then 15-year-old daughter and settled in England. To elude authorities, he took the name of David Davis, the name of one of his former clients. After a while, he feared that the name David Davis wasn't enough to keep authorities from eventually discovering him. So 3 years ago, after sending Ronald Platt and Cynthia Browning to Canada, he became Ronald Platt, and his daughter started to be known as his wife. It was a perfect scheme until Ronald Platt came back to England. Ron Platt, having failed in Canada, returned to England like the bad penny. This threatened everything that Walker had built. His house of cards was about to fall. There were now 2 Ronald Platts. That wasn't any good. One of them had to go.
And on the 20th of July, 1996, he took Ronald Platt 6 miles out to sea. Once there, he struck him on the back of the head, rendering him unconscious. Removed everything from his pockets that he thought might identify him, and then pushed the anchor that he had bought some days earlier down the belt of Platt, pushed him overboard into the sea, where Platt sank and drowned. He made one mistake, Walker. He failed to remove the Rolex watch. The Rolex watch, which led to Platt's identity being discovered, and ultimately Walker's downfall.
The police still have to put Walker himself on his boat on the day of Platt's murder. They get their proof from an entirely unexpected source. Walker's daughter calls Detective Sincock and tells him she distinctly remembers July 20th, the day Ronald Platt died. Her father was out on his boat all that day and returned home disheveled and unusually silent. The only remaining question is, will she testify to that in court?
The first day of the trial was one of the most dramatic that I have ever witnessed in all my police service. The courtroom was completely full. The minute she walked into that courtroom, Walker rose and stared at her. And it was quite chilling, the way that he stared, as though he was still at this time trying to exert his influence on her. He remained with his eyes fixed on her until she had delivered that damning evidence, the fact that he'd been out on the boat on the day that Ron Platt died.
The jury took just 2 hours to decide that Albert Walker was guilty of murdering Ronald Platt.
Ronald Platt is probably the person that helped us most in this investigation. Ronald Platt is the person who, one chance in a million, actually returned from his watery grave and pointed firmly the finger at the person who'd killed him, his former friend that he knew as David Davis, Albert Walker.
It was the dead man, Ronald Platt himself, who led investigators to the evidence. His Rolex watch, which gave them the time of death and who he was. The anchor, the traces of zinc on his belt, and the bruises on his body. Platt even led police to his murderer by writing down David Davis's cell number.
The victim in this case was always there giving us the information as to what had happened. Fortunately, we listened to the victim, and through forensic examinations in a variety of fields, brought out what Ronald Platt was saying to us and brought his killer to justice.
Albert Walker will spend the better part of the rest of his life in prison. Not only did he steal people's money, he stole their lives. But Ronald Platt refused to let him get away with it. Having failed at everything else, Ronald Platt came back from the grave and nailed his cold-hearted killer. The stories on Exhibit A are based on true cases. The forensic scientists and investigators are the actual individuals who worked on the cases. The names of the victims are fictitious. The names of the guilty are real.